This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, so welcome everyone. Today's session is talking about presenting yourself with confidence. And as easy as that sounds, confidence is so important on the day-to-day activities, especially with the workplace now, but it's also something very difficult to do. And sometimes each one of us has struggles presenting the confidence that we want to display to others. So I have a wonderful panel of executive women who know how to do this and know how to display it. So I'm going to give a chance for each one of you guys to go ahead and introduce yourselves, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So Kirsten, do you want to go ahead and get started and introducing yourself?
Sure. And not knowing if are there specific things you want us to say besides maybe a little bit of just what we do for a living? Is that it? Or just make sure I've got it right?
So
okay.
who you are, what you do for a living, because we'll have time for you to speak.
Nope, that's fine. Kirsten Thayer, I am a 20 plus year product management professional in digital products and based in Los Angeles.
Okay, thank you. Lexa, can you share next?
Yeah, hi everyone. Glad to be here. Lexa Anderson. I've been in financial services, information technology for over 22 years. And prior to that, 9 years in mechanical engineering. So both male dominated fields. Originally from the SoCal area, but have been in Northern California for the last 10 years.
Okay, thank you, Lexa. Sonia?
Hi, everyone. My name is Sonia Gutierrez Mendoza, and I've worked in higher education for 25 years. I specifically work in student enrollment and currently admissions, always with a technical twist to my job. So that's how I know Kim, and I'm happy to be here.
All right, so let me go ahead and share my screen. Hold on a second. Of course, we're having some technical difficulties. All right, let's see if this wants to play nice right now.
You're muted, Kim.
Okay, all right. That's again. All right. So when you were little, as growing up as a woman, I was often taught, don't brag, don't be arrogant. You'll be considered conceited if you do. As I started getting into the workforce, I started hearing the words, your work will show for itself. How many of you have heard these type of terms before? Yeah, and sadly, as I've been working with clients who are in college right now, these terms are still being told to young women and little girls. Now, this is not shared with men. And so men are told, hey, take credit for the work that you've done. Make sure that you're showing off what you've done. And so these things seem so trivial, but they make a huge difference in how we perceive ourselves in the workplace as well as we perceive men. Because if I brag about a project that we just completed, then I'm being arrogant, and then I'm being too aggressive. Versus my male counterpart can do that, and they're like, hey, yeah, he did a great job. I remember when I first started becoming a leader years ago, and I was lucky enough to go to a leadership conference. Sonia and I actually went to this conference together, and they were sharing that it's important for women to be comfortable being assertive. And I had to take a step back and for years really understand, what does that mean? What does me being assertive actually mean? So there's a chain effect. When you have confidence in how you're working, it starts to change your behavior, it starts to change your thoughts, your emotions, even your body language. And what that leads to is a more positive response to what you try to do. And it's very difficult when you're not taught this growing up, and you have to learn the hard way when you're working. And it's important for all of us to kind of understand, okay, you know what? There is a different way to do this. And for me, taking credit for my work, I'm not considered arrogant, and it's not something that is conceited, but it's something that should be normal and should be something that we are all comfortable doing. So I want to take a quick survey. All right, so please take some time and look at the questions and answer. Has demonstrating confidence been a challenge for you? All right, so we have 5 yeses and 1 no. So for the person who said no, can you give us some reasons why it hasn't been a challenge for you?
Maybe I'm referring to more recent life. So I'm sorry. I maybe I should have responded as one of the panelists.
No, it's okay. I want everyone to respond.
I think kind of going back to your point about the cycle, it's sort of like confidence breeds confidence. So if you build on success over time, my experience is that it tends to make things that when I was younger, that would have been very daunting to consider either doing, taking on, presenting, whatever, become much more common practice and it's sort of part of the job, I guess I would say. I don't know if that's others' experience, but that's been mine.
That's good. Okay, for the people who said yes, can anyone share why demonstrating confidence has been a challenge?
Hello. So it's not so
Hello.
much as demonstrating. It's you have it and you know you have it. But I'm older too, and as you go through the process, you learn how to provide perceptions for the people that require or have that need to move forward when you're making, a decision about work. There's something that you have to do and you have to get done. So you have to kind of cater to what that person's need is to accomplish your goal.
Got it. Thank you. That's important. Anyone else who said yes, it has been a challenge for me, want to share their insights?
I'll jump in. This is Lexa. I think, Kim, from a career perspective, I remember in the beginning of my career, you're a different person at work than at home. And so you kind of think, of your home personality and how your family treats you and how your cousins and how the interactions go. And then work is so different and they don't know who you are at home, but you know, so then you have to start to separate, you know, the professional Lexa at work versus like the Lexa likes to cook and like dance and be with her cousins. It's not the same. So I think in the beginning, definitely that was hard and learning to separate, and no one tells you, right? Like, it's okay. And now everyone's like, be your authentic self. But when I was starting my career, there were differences, right? And I don't think anyone will really be the same way they are at home, 100% the same way they are at work. But anyways, that was a challenge for me in the beginning.
Got it. I think one challenge similar to the beginning of my career is I didn't really anticipate women being treated that differently than men. And I got the rough side of that. So unfortunately, um, I was outsourced to a consulting firm when I started working at CGU. And the new CEO actually would not speak to me as a woman. I was the leader of the group, and he would come into the office, and we all shared a combined office, and we had a separator. And he would walk over to the men who reported to me and say, "Tell Kim this." And they're like, "She's right behind you. You can speak to her." And he's like, "No, I'm going to tell you guys this, and you guys can relay that message to her." And so, as a woman, that was so appalling to me to say, okay, my role and my title and my experience aren't that important. They're not important enough for you to actually speak directly to me. And so that was something where I had to say, okay, I can let this erode my confidence forever, or I can do some things that will help me rebuild confidence despite the actions of others. And unfortunately, during my career, that was not the only time. As a woman, we had some issues being confident. Kirsten, I still have in my closet. When we were working at Entertainment Partners, we actually had to get a shirt that said EP Smart Women. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, obviously it was tied to there was some branding with that, but yeah, I think part of it is demonstrating that there are women in technology leadership roles. Sorry for the Dr. Doolittle thing going on. I've got like dogs and cats in here wanting to see what I'm doing. But yeah, that I think in any place when there's when you're in male dominated situations, and even unfortunately sometimes with other women who are not necessarily supportive, you can find that. So yeah, I think, like you said, owning your own piece of that. You can't control what everybody else is going to choose to do. It's about how you choose to view yourself and how you know, have grace in those moments of stress, I'll say.
Absolutely, absolutely. So why is this so important for women to share? Let me share my screen.
I think when you share, Kim, it's putting you on mute. There you go.
Some reason when Zoom changed that share, it automatically mutes you, which is ridiculous. So sorry, I'm sure you didn't read my lips. So one of the things that when you're confident, you can be assertive in situations. So you don't have to sit back and say, well, if they ask if my opinion, I might share it. You can freely speak. It can also break that group think of like, well, this is what we think and this is how it is. It also lets you be more productive. You can have effective communication, and you can contribute to a positive culture. These are things that are very important that just don't naturally happen. And so it's one of the reasons why we wanted to focus the first workshop on talking about positive culture and why these things are so important, and why it's not something that just naturally happens. It's something that we actually have to be active on and actively doing. So, any questions or thoughts about that?
I was just going to confirm what you just said, which is I wrote down on my notes, building confidence is an ongoing practice and it requires practice day over day, year over year. And I like what Lixa said about who we were in the beginning of our careers is very different than who we are now. The confidence I have today is not the confidence I had 25 years ago. And it's because you have to intentionally do the actions every meeting, every, whatever committee you're involved in or whatever work that you do. It's a constant interaction and you have to take the steps, even in small little ways, to practice that courage that it takes to build your confidence.
So that leads us to the next question. Where is everyone in their career level? Because that is going to be important to kind of understand, because similar to what Sonia said, at the beginning of your career level to the end to retirement, that confidence goes up and down. So I see we have some entry level, some executive level. Some retirement. So for those who are in the entry level, have you experienced yet a situation where you haven't had as much confidence as you want?
Yes.
Okay, can you say more, Maya?
Yes, in my own college, actually, by a handful of professors, actually. Conveniently, the two professors, or I think if I'm really thinking about it, three, are good examples um, of this because they one specifically talked down to me a lot. Um, and it was something that I had a really big issue with that I took to the department, only because it genuinely felt like there was some kind of power trip going on, because it didn't feel like he was talking to me with respect.
That's unfortunate. I'm glad that you did not let that slide and you took it to the department. That's wonderful. But yeah, that's unfortunate that you've already experienced that. What about towards retirement? Anyone want to share how confidence has been built or still a struggle sometimes?
I guess I'm the only one in retirement, huh? I agree. As time passes, you're going to build that confidence and you're not going to feel anything that you felt when you were younger. You're going to be very secure in about what you do and you're going to know the path to take in order to accomplish things. So I go back and I do consultation and I kind of recreated myself. I'm teaching vocational nurses, which I have never done in my career. So confidence is built over time and you learn what you need to do in order to be successful. I agree with that.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for participating in this. I want to give each of our panelists an opportunity to speak specifically about their experience and their challenges and how they've been able to overcome this. So Kirsten, can you go ahead and share your personal experience with the group?
Sure. And wanting to make sure I go back to our questions so I get those right. Bear with me. I'm so sorry.
So why do you think confidence is important?
Thank
How
you.
does it help
Meeting that
you
one
in your
first.
career?
Why do I think it's important? I think ultimately we've been talking a lot about this already. It's the sort of thing that helps become a flywheel for you later as you as you do one thing, whatever that thing is that maybe you know you do well, it helps to build confidence in other things, and it acts as a multiplier for you on, sorry, I'm so sorry. I had a dog accident happen right in front of me in my bedroom, so I'm having a difficult time trying to stay on task. I'll just say, here's a moment of needing to have confidence. I'm confident I'm not going to kill my dog right now, but but seriously, I'd say the reason it's important is you use it as a building block, and you need it as a way to help you establish the next leg up. So whether it's you started in a college situation and you did something well there, you parlay that into the next thing, and you use it as a way to learn and build. So to me, it's just foundational. It's a necessary part of doing any job. Whether it's dealing with men or women, I think it's just a natural piece of that.
So how has demonstrating confidence helped you personally in your career?
I'll go back and I'm going to respond a little bit to Isabella's comment that she posted in there. So I'll give two examples. My first job, so I've had two careers, one in entertainment and then one in technology. There was an overlap for a period of time in both. But when I started off in the entertainment industry, luckily for me, I sort of didn't know how difficult it was. And I had worked in college. I did I did an internship someplace, and I was able to come out to LA and get a first job working at a pretty prestigious production company. And I was working for 3 heads of physical production, and one of them was a woman. And even getting the job, I didn't realize how difficult it would be to get the job, but I had such comfort in what I had done that I came into it not approaching it sort of like, oh my gosh, I hope they pick me. It was sort of like, well, of course they're going to pick me. Look at what I did. And that bringing that, it's not bravado so much as like, hey, I'm capable of doing this. I feel okay about it. And I didn't have fear of what if I don't get it, which you can sort of see in situations dealing with women who will cut you down. What I learned from that, although it was a very stressful period of time in my life, it became an important thing that I factor in when I look at a situation, especially if I'm going to either be working for a woman or working with women who have power over or influence over my career. And part of it is learning what's in it for me, like for that other individual, what's driving them. And I often find that if you can avoid the thing that triggers them, and that is often the easiest thing, but that, I'm obviously solutioning here, but I think the confidence going into those types of jobs helped me early in my career, and got me established in the entertainment industry. Had I not had that going in, and that's the same has happened since then. Every time that I've demonstrated and I've felt really confident about stuff, I've gotten the job every time. Every single time that I have either not gotten a job or didn't was not able to succeed in an initiative or what have you, it's because I also didn't have faith in myself. And I think that comes through. So.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. And are there specific steps or things that you do to demonstrate confidence?
Yes, and I think that's evolved over time. I would say if you're a person younger in your career, and you exhibit almost too much confidence and you aren't being deferential to others around you, whether it be male or female leaders, that is something that I would say if you're more, again, more coming into, recognizing and often asking, so, kind of what is it that you need from me? What are the things that are important to you? Recognizing that it doesn't even matter about you. Sometimes it's about the other person. And so you could be the best at what you do. It's learning how to navigate the politics of the places that you work. And sometimes I would say that's listening with 2 ears and 1 mouth. I've seen often where you might have all the information, but they don't care, they don't want to know. So the more you can sort of listen and read the room and then learn from that, who are going to be my allies, who are the stakeholders that need to be influenced, and what are the best ways to do that. As time has gone on, I think you learn a lot more about the politics of that and how to navigate it. But I would say for those, especially if we've got some folks that are earlier in their career, yeah, listening more. And it doesn't mean that you can be confident and have all the answers, but asking a lot of questions too. I often find if I don't agree with something, if you go out and say, I disagree, that's not allowing people to save face, and depending upon the culture, the people you work with, that can be a death sentence. So I often will just ask questions about what have we considered? And once I kind of have enough information, I can then say, had we considered such and such? And I will use a drip campaign often to get things started as a way to get the ball rolling. So that's enough about my stuff. I want to make sure I give time for Sonia and Lexa.
Yeah. So before we move on, I see some comments in the group. Shrita, you want to talk about why this is important and not taught often enough?
Yeah, so I think it's important because a lot of times, especially if you're coming out of school or you are new to a field, you have the skill of that particular thing to do. You don't necessarily always have the skill of knowing how to read the room and how to have one ear open for politics, which is everywhere, and one ear open for now, how do I just go to work and do my job? And I know when I started, I didn't do it well. Okay. And so I ran into quite a few problems with politics. And what you hear a lot are, oh, I don't do politics. Well,
Not true.
it's not true.
It's everywhere.
They don't know how to do politics, and they don't talk about that very often. So you saying that, I'm like, I wish somebody taught that to me when I was going through, and just how to just pause, read the room. And now in the field that I'm in, and I have students working for me sometimes in teaching them, they come in strong, they come in very well skilled in their field, but they don't know how to do the politics. And so it's like, let's pause, let's just look at the relationships here, look at what's important to this person over here and that person over there. You do need to know this stuff. So I'm so glad you said that, because it's not something I don't think I've heard it ever, to be honest, in my whole career. We all feel it. Yeah. And we either manage it and go through it well, or we don't. But I don't think I've ever actually heard someone say you actually need to know how to, you need to know how to read the room in order to be successful and to be able to build confidence in that area. It's really important.
I hate to say this, and I'll leave it with this. I think it is, unfortunately, in some cases, almost more important than what you know. Because it doesn't matter. You could be the smartest person in the room, but if you've alienated everybody in the room, it doesn't matter what you have to say. And so I've seen this over and over, especially mentoring women who are younger, who want to move up, who want to demonstrate what they know. It's like, sometimes it's going to be about the politics, and let that come through. Going back to your point, Kimberly, let your work show for itself, but it's like, you can't let your work show it for itself unless you even have a seat at the table. So.
Absolutely. And Bella, you said that this is something that you've struggled with. This is something, to everyone's point on, there's no book that says, oh yeah, here are the politics of the organization. Oh, that person over there, you're going to have to agree with, even if you don't. This person over there, you're going to have to follow up with them after the meeting and have a conversation. That person over there. And so this is one of the reasons why we decided to have this type of conference and to start talking about these things. And instead of having each person have to guess for themselves, let's start talking about it, and let's making it a real place that we can start building and empowering each other, so everyone doesn't have to struggle and trip over the same rock. So thank you, Kirsten, so much for sharing. Lexa, do you want to share why you think confidence is important?
Sure, yeah. This is great conversations. I wish I had this when I was your guys' age, like so much. It wasn't this open, and people weren't this transparent. So I'm so happy for those of you that have attended. I think it's important to value yourself the way others see and value you, because sometimes you may not see it. One of the things, like an HBR study shows 70% of people around you are like dealing with imposter syndrome. That's when you think you shouldn't be in a certain position, or you're constantly being negative towards yourself. And one of the things I tell younger folks is, especially when it comes to jobs, I think Kristen had mentioned, like, you got hired for the role, and so there's a reason you're there. A lot of females, I find, won't even apply for a job unless they have a checkbox next to every skill set and every characteristic. And males are not like that. Hiring managers, we just want the most of what we can get. And we actually are looking for like the potential for people to learn the other things that they may not have. And so one of the key takeaways of having that confidence is, if you have half or more than half, don't be afraid to apply for that job, because once you get the interview, that's where you really get to like sell yourself or demonstrate what you can do or what you've done in the past that may not translate 100% into, an application online or maybe even your resume. So I think it's important, especially when you get the role, you got the role for a reason. Don't be nervous. There's going to be learnings along the way, but just have that confidence that you're there for a reason.
That's an excellent point. I tell my clients that all the time. So many of my clients take themselves out of the situation and out of the equation without letting it do it. And the average number, so I did the data on this just to pull it, 50% of candidates have only 50, people who get hired only have 50% of the skills that are listed.
Yeah,
So
that's so true.
Absolutely, very important.
And I feel like that old saying, like, men are given opportunities on potential and females have to we feel we have to demonstrate it and be doing the role, but you see it all along. You'll see somebody get promoted, you're like, wait, that person doesn't even have a manager title, but they did a great job on this project and now they're managing people. Like, how did that happen? So yeah, I think it's just have the confidence in yourself, and people will start to be confident in you because they see your confidence. That's also plays into that.
So how's demonstrating confidence helped you personally in your career?
Oh man, I'm definitely one of those. My mantra is, ask. The answer is always going to be no if you never ask. It's the same thing with the Michael Jordan quote, right? You'll miss all the shots you never take. So I have a funny story to share. My husband had just retired from the Navy, and we had moved back. We were like all over the place, and we moved back to like the Southern California area, Upland. And I interviewed for a job, and it was like my first like in an office job. I was working in virtual environments. This was back in 2005, and virtual wasn't a big thing back then. And the hiring manager did not want to pay me the rate of the role. And I knew it was because I was a female. I just could feel, and he was saying, well, you don't have experience. And I had experience, but it was all virtual. So we didn't have an office. It was virtual. I'd go to conferences, I'd get clients and train them. And so I told him, you know what? The rate was 60,000. I said, he wanted to offer me 45. And I said, give me 45. And after 90 days, if you don't think I'm worth it, then you can keep me at 45. But I guarantee you after 90 days, you're going to give me the 60. And sure enough, when the 90 days came, he gave me a raise. Sadly, it wasn't what we agreed to. He gave me 55. And I just started looking because I thought, well, I kept my end of the deal. I worked like I knew I would. And within 3 weeks, I was resigning and got hired at Green Dot. That's where I met Kim. We met at Green Dot. And that job paid 75,000. So I went from 45 to possibly 55, but not taking it, or taking it. And then 3 weeks later, 75. But had I not stood my ground, and I told him, it's so sad because that 5,000, if he would have just given me 60, I would have stayed. I would have never even started looking. So I think it's definitely helped me value myself higher than I would have. And it was exciting story to like see the jump and the progression.
No, that's wonderful. I'm glad that you did. We never would have met.
I
if
know.
you hadn't. But no, that's wonderful because sometimes you're offered the short end of the stick and you're just supposed to sit and accept it and say,
Yeah.
hey, wait a second. How come I'm not getting recognized or getting valued like my peers are who are doing maybe less than you are? And so for you to stand up, that's really excellent. How do you demonstrate confidence on a day-to-day basis and since then?
Yeah, I definitely always like prepare, especially if it's like a presentation. I often rehearse. Rehearsing is so underrated. Like people are like, that's silly. Why would I do it? Like, no, I rehearse what I'm going to say. I practice it so many times. And obviously, like the higher like Kristen was saying, know your audience, the higher the executive, you want to be on point and spot on. And maybe if it's like a team meeting, it's not so stressful. You don't have to do those things. But knowing your audience is so key. Like Kristen was saying, if there's going to be like financial folks in the room or a CFO, I'm going to talk numbers about whatever project I'm working on. If there's a COO in the room or somebody from operations, I'm talking about the efficiencies and how we're going to save time and how we're going to have, people focus on other higher valued tasks. If there's a experienced person or the experienced team, I do comparisons, right? Like I was always financial institutions, but I can give comparisons like, well, you know how the experience is on the Starbucks app. Everybody has the points and everybody comes back. Like it's easy to relate in that way, but it's so critical when you're first starting out to know who's in the room and know what they're going to be looking for. Ask questions in advance. Like it's okay to go to someone that you know in a department and say, hey, this is your boss. He's going to be in a meeting next week. What are things he likes or what are things she likes? It's so helpful. I think preparing, rehearsing, sharing the story, and the higher you go up, using more visuals. I'm still surprised how many people like read off bullets or look at something instead of having a visual or a graph. Because the higher the leadership, they don't have a lot of time. They don't have the capacity, like they're trying to do so many things in that day. So whatever time you get in front of them, take it and really appreciate it. And then just like give yourself that positive talk. I love it when I see those little, TikTok or Instagram videos where there's little girls and boys giving those positive affirmations to themselves. Like, I'm beautiful, I'm strong. I still do that to this day. Like, I'm superwoman. I'm going to walk in there and I just exude confidence. And you still, it's very, when you think it and you say it, you start to feel it and believe it. And it just comes out more natural and easygoing. And I think what we're doing today, right, sharing our experiences, because then the young ones on the call are like, oh, okay, so I'm not alone. Like, this is normal. But not everyone talks about it, right? And it's the more we talk and share, the more we get comfortable, and then we can become those allies for the others coming in. So
Yeah, excellent points about knowing your audience and practicing. And really, you have a certain amount of time in front of people. Some people are visual, some people are not. Meet both of them where they're at.
yes.
Is really very helpful. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Alexa?
I would just double down on her point about preparing for presentations. You're going to have a few opportunities earlier in your career where you have to present. And I often have found anytime that somebody asks me questions in advance of a meeting, I look at that as a positive because that means this person is taking this seriously. They're preparing themselves. So to me, that's always a positive. So understanding what they want to get out of it, being really clear and pre-wiring. I never heard that term before I was working. Pre-wiring people, share the deck ahead of time, get somebody's feedback about it so that it's not going to fall flat. You need to get enough people to look at it in advance so that you can go in there and go, I've got this. So that was the only reminded me of that.
True.
Thanks, Alexa.
So true.
Great point. And Bella, great question. How do you ask these questions if you're new and you don't know coworkers enough? This is where you start to bond with people. And so you can kind of say, hey, what are your thoughts about this meeting? How was I? Did I sound good? What do you think? And just starting to have those small conversations on a one-on-one basis, I know between all of the ladies here that I've worked with, we've all had those conversations before or after meetings, and it helps you understand the other person, how you're being perceived, and different ways that you can ask. And it starts building those relationships. And so the more you ask and confirm and are able to, just reinforce what you're learning, it just helps you, regardless if you're new or if you're old at an organization. So Sonia, you want to share your thoughts on why you think confidence is important?
Sure. I feel like I can echo everything Kirsten and Lexa said. And I want to talk about the preparation piece because, we all have different strengths and ways in which we communicate. I am not an auditory person. I have to write everything down and I take notes like nonstop note taker. And so for me, in order to be confident, I have to have prepared ahead of time. I have to know it so well that it just rolls naturally and comfortably. And so for me, that requires me to write it down. So in advance of today's session, I actually wrote out an entire page of notes of things I thought, in case this comes up, this is what I want to say, because I don't rely on my memory to just get it out. And it's interesting because most of what I have on my paper, I've been circling every time Kirsten or Alexa said, and there's almost a one-to-one match on every line on my paper, which is fascinating to me because I've only ever met them once before in advance of today, and our careers are very, very different. And yet we have so much in common, and so much of the advice that we have to give is identical. I wrote down, I circled belief, build, listen, know your audience, self-reflect, and I have a couple other things too, but I can't echo the sentiment enough. And so why it's important for me is, if I'm not confident in myself, how can I get someone else to be confident in me? It starts within, and you have to show people how to treat you. And if you do that for yourself, others will do it for you. It's like the law of attraction. I'm a big believer in the law of attraction. What do you put out in the universe will come right back to you. And in the way I treat myself and the way I show up for work, for meetings, for Zooms, for whatever it is, presentations, I get what I give, right? And so, so that's kind of my answer to that question. And then what were the other two questions? So again, not auditory, so you got to repeat for me.
Okay, me talking on mute, I've learned, is not the best. So how has demonstrating confidence helped you specifically in your career?
I work in education, and so collaboration is a key value that goes across all the universities where I've worked. If you're not a collaborator, you're going to be left out. And collaboration is hard when you don't know the people in your new committee or whatever project you're working on. They work in different departments and have different goals. The politics in higher ed is extraordinary. You wouldn't think so, but it is extraordinary, and you have to learn how to navigate. And so if I walk into a meeting, a committee, or a project, knowing my part, and I bring that to the table, and I'm confident in what I have to offer, then I think the other folks in that setting can say, I know she's gonna be a good team member. So let's partner up. Because for me, one of you said relationships, and in my work, I have to have strong relationships. I have to be able to pick up the phone or get someone on Zoom or Teams to say, hey, I'm not sure I understand this new policy. Can we talk through it so that I can execute it in my office properly? And so relationship building comes from the confidence in extending that invitation to collaborate, not just receiving an invitation. It goes both ways. And so for me in higher ed, that has been very helpful. And I think it builds upon itself. I think Kirsten said that it's like an ongoing cycle. The more you build it, the bigger it gets, and the stronger it gets, and the more confidence you have in, every next chapter of our careers requires and demands us to kind of up our level, right? We step it up, and you can only do that if you've got the building blocks behind you. And so each time you have the opportunity You have to exude that confidence in yourself, and so that others can have it in you, and then you just keep moving. It's like you can't rest. You have to, and I don't mean rest like rejuvenate. I mean like you can't sit back and be like, all right, I got this, and no problem. It's like, no, okay, I got this. One of my favorite sayings comes from Coach Phil Jackson. If you saw The Last Dance, he said, success only happens in the moment that you achieve it. You have to do it again, and you have to do it again. And I'm like, yes, that's a lot of things in life. And for me, building confidence is like that. You have to keep doing it over and over. It's a practice that goes on and on.
That is important. So how do you demonstrate it on and on a daily basis in your work, and so you can say, I'm keep on building upon this?
I actually have some specific techniques that I've used. One of them I heard Kirsten talk about, where you get into a conversation or a meeting or something, and perhaps your knowledge that you bring, perhaps you do disagree with the person who's presenting or speaking. So I've learned a technique to get around that, to engage without being offensive. And I like to say, I'm curious about that. Could you talk me through this a little bit more? Or I wonder if we've considered, and I think that was close to what Kirsten was talking about. So you find these engaging ways to get someone to either go deeper in their explanations so that you can understand, or you can also offer, I wonder if you've thought about it. Let me share my perspective. I'm thinking about XYZ policy, and perhaps we could do it this way. The word perhaps is a huge power word that I use a lot. Perhaps if we did it this way, and it's a very non-confrontational way to get someone to hear what you're saying, because if you just disagree with someone, they're going to stop listening to you, and you might have a great solution to offer. But if, again, back to the politics thing, if you set yourself up to not be listened to, then your solution won't matter. It doesn't matter how much you know or what you know how to do. You have to keep that communication line wide open, and it runs two ways. You have to be open to others as well. So the other technique I have used in the past, a previous job I had required me to go into like executive level meetings in an industry I did not work. I was like a representative of my industry to another industry that I had no knowledge of. And it took me a long time to build my confidence to even speak in those meetings. But what I found was, I don't have to know it all. I don't have to have all the answers. But if I show up consistently and I offer to help where I can, I start those relationship building blocks, and I start to see where I can connect, or where I can contribute, or where someone can invite me to be part of something that they're doing. And so I usually would say, is there something as a representative of my university that we can do to help you with this problem, or with this teacher shortage, or with that substitute shortage? I don't have the answer to a teacher shortage, but I have the tools that can connect. So I say, what can I do to help? And that usually swing some doors wide open to say, oh, you want to help? Come on over. Let's see if we can put together a workshop, or let's see if we can put together a job fair. You have space in your building. I have a need. Let's have an event. And that's how things kind of grow and evolve. And that's how you get in with groups that perhaps you don't know anything about, but you want to be their partner. So those are my techniques. I wonder, or I'm curious, and how can I help?
Awesome. Those are great techniques. Thank you for sharing. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts about Sonia's perspective and techniques?
I have a quick thought. I think when Sonia mentioned, when she's in a room with other industries, and maybe, she's not expected to know everything that's going on, but how does she engage? I had early on I was in a meeting, and one of my business systems analysts, it was actually at Green Dot, so English was her second language. And when she would get asked questions, she would say, I don't know. And afterwards, I met with her and I said, hey, you have to stop saying, I don't know. And she's like, but I don't know. I'm like, I know you don't know, but what you need to say is, that's a good question. Let me have some time to research, and let me get back to you on that, because that is such a different response. I literally had people coming to me not wanting her as part of their project, because they were like, she doesn't know a lot of things. So I just rather have one of your other team members. And and she was of Chinese descent. So I think the personality and the culture played into that as well. Like she really felt like she was lying. And I'm like, you're not lying. You're just saying, give me some time to figure it out. You know where to find the answer. You just don't have the answer in front of you in the meeting. So I think, when you're in meetings and you feel like you need to know everything, it's okay if you don't, and just respond positively back, get some more time, but then definitely follow up and send that emails to that person with the question or the answer, whatever it is. But I think that is really good.
Yeah, no, those are some excellent points, excellent points. And I think these are reasons why confidence is important. Confidence has been very important to me because I have worked in male dominant industries where literally I was told and ignored. And so instead of saying, okay, well, you must listen to me, trying to scream and cry to get attention, I had to learn, I had to do things differently. So one thing that helped me with confidence is when I was at Nationwide Pet Insurance, I would often speak to the executive team. And one day the CIO pulled me aside and he said, you know what, Kim, we don't want to hear your opinion or we don't want to hear your perspective. We want to hear facts. And we want to understand the data that's happening with this. And once we understand the data and what's going on, then you can share your opinion. And at first, that was very humiliating to me. And then I sat back and I watched how the other executives were operating. And guess what? They started with the data. And then after they started with the data, then they'd share their own thoughts and opinions. And so what I started to do was like, okay, let me try this. Let me see if this works. And so I started gathering data and bringing that data to the beginning of the conversation. So fast forward to future places in my career, some people were like, well, I don't like this idea. I remember at Entertainment Partners, I was bringing new perspectives on our payroll products and why we need to do things differently. And people were like, that's just your opinion. And I was like, well, actually, here's the data. Here's the information, and here's why this is important to us. And not only that, here's what our competition is doing, and here are the expectations from our actual customers and stakeholders. And so that dramatically changed the conversation. And I had confidence in what I was doing, because if someone was just like, well, that's just your opinion or that's just your thought, then I don't have to say that. I have the data to actually prove it and back it up. And so this starts changing how you are perceived and how others perceive what you're bringing to the conversation. Most recently, while I was at TriPoint Homes, I had asked some questions to some of our design center team executives, like, hey, how do we know that this experience is really working for our customers? And the response I got back was, we know. Okay, perfect. And it wasn't a, we know because we have the data, or we know because we have the survey, we know because of this. It was just, we know, how dare you ask us? And so as we started building relationships and working together, this question came up again because we are getting a lot of complaints that the process was not working as efficiently as they know. And so this gave an opportunity to say, hey, how about we get some other insight and information about this process? Not from me. We can go and get a third party, and let's look at this together and see if we can gain any insight into this. So again, bringing data into the conversation and changing the dynamics of, oh, it's just what Kim is saying, to, oh, maybe not. Maybe there is some method to the madness that she's bringing. And so this helps me demonstrate confidence on a daily basis, because it's not just, hey, have I really validated my thoughts? Have I really taken the time to do the research and inspect what I'm saying and what I'm thinking and the direction that I'm encouraging people to go? But yeah, I have. And it helps me do this on a daily basis. So, when I'm working with my clients who are in the job market, I'm like, ooh, I understand the pain, what it's like in the job market, because I can start to relate to them. It's not just, oh, you don't know what it's like to get an email saying you don't have all the skills when you do. And, yeah, I know, because I research and I have that same experience. So it's not just, oh, this is what she thinks. There's root and merit behind it. And that's what helps me be confident and helped me dramatically in my career. There's been so many places where if I didn't have that data and didn't have that quote unquote proof of what I was talking about, what I brought to the table would be instantly dismissed, and people would be like, don't listen to her. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Kristen, what's your thought?
Yeah, I just, you said something a little earlier, and I just wanted to sort of yes and that. When we think about situations where demonstrating confidence is important, one of the things, if people tell you that, people are treated differently, men and women, they're right, and we have to approach it differently. So if we have an expectation that, and I think Sonia was the one giving specific examples of how to broach topics in a meeting, the reality is we can't change the reality of what we have around us, but we have to acknowledge that that's there. And the way, for me, again, demonstrating confidence is knowing that you have some information to share. If you are overtly curious and sincere about it and want to learn, often people will spill all sorts of stuff, and you can use that as a way to help, I don't want to say leverage, but use that as a way to say, okay, so that, when we talk about tactics and what made me think of what you said earlier, Kim, oftentimes somebody will say, I disagree. And that will often happen at maybe a more senior position. And what I have learned from other leaders is oftentimes if they do, it's that you're not working from the same information. So what I will even say is, that's great. My sense is we're probably not working from the same information. It's very unemotional. It doesn't, you're not challenging them, you're allowing them to save face, but you're basically saying, probably working from different information. Why don't you tell me a little bit more to make sure I understand? And if there's anything that, based on what you say, that I think you may not be aware of, I'll share as well. And then we can see where where we go from there. So you're not basically, again, openly challenging, but it shows that you're willing to meet them halfway. You're also willing to not just walk away because they've told you no. And to me, that's the best way to sort of still say, I'd like to keep the door open, but I want to hear first from you. So I always start with asking them to tell me first rather than advocating my point of view. I think that's like rule number one, especially when you're dealing with somebody who's reporting into you. But I will often do it with senior leaders and ask them to tell me first. So then I can use that as a way of say, hey, well, what about this? So it just, again, tactics, if that's helpful for others.
Yes, no, excellent point. Excellent point. And information is power. So one of the things that I do before I have these conversations is send the information ahead of time. And that way it allows people to get on the same page about what we're talking about and why we're talking about this. And that way it's not a dispute in the meeting about, well, you think this or that. You can have that conversation of, hey, this is where I got the data from. Do you have any data that's different, that has a different perspective? Let's share. But that's part of the discussion that we can have. So any questions or comments about this before we move on?
I definitely think like the data part, especially now, like data is so huge and there's so many different types of data. There's analytics, there's AI, there's machine learning. It's so big. And I think asking in reverse, it's not always easy for a company to have data readily available. So keep that in mind. But yeah, I think having the data in advance and sharing is so key, and a good step to take when having those kind of interactions.
Yeah, and sometimes like the companies that I worked with recently didn't have a lot of data. And so bringing that data in and sharing that with them ahead of time so they can see, okay, this is what others in similar industries or different similar roles are doing or achieving, that helps change the dynamics of the conversation. Good question. Any other questions or comments? All right. So one of the things that we want to talk about is, what does demonstrating confidence actually look like? So some of the things that we touched on is keeping your emotions in check. So this is hard sometimes. So when I was ignored blatantly by one of the senior leaders, and they told me, speaking to my staff and not me, I could have lost my mind. And then they would have been reinforced to say, see, this is why we didn't talk to her. This is why I'm talking to you. Not afraid to being wrong. It's okay if you don't have the answers. It's okay if you're unsure, and you can say that and say, you know what, I'm not 100% sure. Let me get back to you. Or here's my thought, but I want to confirm this later. That is absolutely okay. Also, listening more than speaking. Sometimes, especially in different situations where you're not sure of your audience, taking a step back and active listening. Okay, who is saying what? How are people perceiving that? Being able to adjust your style and conversations based on what you're saying. Being able to lift others up and praise them. It's also taking action. If you say that you're going to do something and you do it, it demonstrates confidence, and people know, oh, I can always count on Kim for doing that because she said she was. And then also, never stop learning. That's also very, very important. So what are your thoughts about these things?
I want to jump in on your number 4 point, lifting others up. I think we've said it several times on listening more than speaking. The other thing you can do in any level of any stage of your career is when others are being opinionated or asking questions, and there's a few, because you'll always have a few that don't speak in a meeting. They're just quiet, they're listening, they're not comfortable as much. Asking them, well, what do you think, John? Or what do you think, Sally? Like, that's always helpful, because they probably won't say it unless asked. And if they're known for being quiet, they probably have great ideas, but they never get often asked. So part of lifting others up for your 4th point could also include asking others that haven't shared an opinion, like what their opinion would be, or if something that they've shared with you that could help, then asking that. I think that helps in meetings, because then it looks like you're being inclusive of everybody in the room or the group, or whatever the setting is.
No, excellent point. Excellent point. Thank you for sharing. Does anyone else have any thoughts about these items? Well, let's take another poll. How many of you have tried some of these techniques before? So if you could answer the question, if you've tried these techniques that we're showing on the screen before. Can you guys see the question?
I don't see it.
No, it's not popping up. I was like, are we supposed to do it in the chat? Because your other ones were questions in the poll.
Yeah. Let's try this again. Okay, let me try stopping sharing. That helps. Okay, it does not want to play nicely. Okay, so if you can just respond in the chat, have you tried one of these techniques? And I'll share the screen again in the past. So if you have tried these in the past, can you please say yes or no in the chat? All right. So 6 is my new motto now. Awesome. Awesome. So can someone share which one has been their most successful use? For
I can-
example,
I'll-
go ahead.
I'm gonna take number one, because I struggle with that. I get very passionate about things at work because I care a lot about how I want an outcome to come across. And I have to be very, very mindful. And so one of the things that I notice that some people do, and I am very careful, the way we talk about ourselves, the way we present ourselves. One of the things I want to mention, and I think it ties a little bit to Lex's story about the person who repeated, "I don't know." There's a phrase that gets thrown around casually, not necessarily in work environments, but I've heard it in my work environment where people say, "Well, I'm just a hot mess." And that is like kryptonite to me. It makes me want to like, don't say that. And it isn't that we aren't feeling that way. We're totally okay to feel how we feel. But when you advertise it in that way, that's how people start to see you. And so for number one, there are times when we're tired, we go to work tired, where something has happened in our personal lives and we're just, carrying a lot of stressors. We're not 100%. But in the way I look at when I show up for work, my commitment to my colleagues, to the team that reports to me, to my peers, is that I'm going to give them as much as I can that day of me. And, perhaps we just need to take a little bit longer lunch break. Perhaps the Zoom screen needs to close down, or whatever the case may be. But I think it's always being mindful of those kinds of phrases like, "Oh, hot mess is a hot button for me." I don't really like it. And I've heard my peers say it, and I don't always know what to do in those cases. So usually I'll try and have a side conversation to say, "Girlfriend, let me help," and the other thing is, you don't know if they want your help or your input. So there's that, careful balance of trying to be helpful and then overstepping and giving, what you think is advice, and someone, isn't open to it. So that's where that listening piece comes into play. You really have to pay attention to the body language. And in my case, I work 100% virtually. So it's the virtual language that I see or don't see to know when to make those connections.
Excellent point, Sonia. Excellent point. Thank you for sharing. Does anyone else want to share?
I'll add on, when I look at this, even though I made the joke about number 3, listening more than speaking, I'll say, in my experience as a woman, when you're talking about confidence, I have seen people, at least, again, my experience of it, when you're confident in a situation, you don't feel like you have to talk over everybody else to try to get your opinion heard. And I have seen this over and over in women who are coming up the ladder, and they'll even interrupt and start talking over folks because they just have to get that point across. And it makes that person, unfortunately, even as another woman, I'll go, wow, they seem shrill. And so all the negative words you hear, I find even in myself as a woman going, wow, they won't stop and have the, confidence in themselves to know that they have another opportunity to broach this, but doing it in this manner isn't helping them. And it also doesn't make them look like they're confident in what's happening. Like they feel like they have to fight by, I have to tell you. And that more than any single thing I've seen has really damaged people's ability to move forward in their career, to even just feel like their peers trust them, because they don't feel like that person is really, leaning in to hear what's going on. So that to me is the number one item that I often find helps.
No, that is a wonderful point as well. Wonderful. Does anyone else have any numbers that really resonate with them of these techniques? One that kind of hits home to me is not afraid of being wrong. And so this has been very important for me in my career, because when someone's asking you to prove it, prove what you're talking about and have the data to do that. And sometimes even with the data, you might be wrong. You might have a different perspective and see things, and it's okay. And the first time that this happened to me, when I was in a presentation with a lot of executive men, and I said something and they're like, well, that's not correct. That's not what we do and how we do it. Instead of letting my emotions show, like, okay, I'm going to run to the bathroom and cry real quick, or getting angry and upset and trying to overtalk, it's just, okay, well, thank you. I will, whatchamacallit, if this isn't correct, then I'll go back and research this, and thank you for sharing with me that this is not the right answer. And so we can be on the same page and we can move forward successfully, and letting that be okay. And that does not happen overnight. That also has to do with building confidence and making sure that you believe in yourself and you don't negatively self-talk yourself, and taking yourself out of the equation and telling yourself you're going to fail or you're not going to be good enough. All of those things are important to help with the confidence that each of us displays day in, day out. So any other comments, questions about this overall? So one thing that I do want to share with the group is one thing that we touched on a little bit today was, hey, sometimes women are not supporting each other. Sometimes women are some of the reasons why we don't have a lot of confidence. Well, in our next session, we're actually going to be talking about how women can support each other. And this makes monumental changes to people in their career. When you have other women who you can lean on, who can tell you, hey, this is going well, or you might want to change this, or you might want to do this differently, it just helps grow in your career. And imagine if we could keep doing that for others, how much empowerment we can build within each other. So that's what our next session is going to be about, because we all hit on some wonderful points here that are very important. So any other thoughts or comments before we go?
I was wondering, for the folks that joined, is there a question or a topic we didn't touch that they would want to ask, the panel of us? Because maybe we didn't, or maybe there's an example that they would like to share where something went wrong, and then maybe some ideas of how that could have been maybe different. I don't know if anyone has any, or has, wants to share at that level.
So I actually have a question on this. So I work in the restaurant industry, and for the most part, my managers have always been men. And I've had a couple managers that treat me very, very childish, just because I'm 22. I got into the restaurant industry when I was about 16 years old, working as a host, working as servers, trying to just make my way in it. And I've had a couple of instances where managers would treat me as if I was a dog. They would snap at me, or they would whistle for me to come over, and they would talk down to me because I was so young and because they thought I didn't know anything. How do I get them to stop besides like just quitting?
Kimberly, can I ask if I'm sure all three of us probably have ideas we can give. So
Yeah.
I'm happy to go first. And I would just say,
please share first.
early in my career, I also did work in food service, but I'd say when you work in the entertainment industry, your first job, you're working as a production assistant, and it's like the worst job you're treated like a dog. So one of the things I did learn about it is, and I hate to say this, in some cases, it's not personal, it's the industry that you're in, and it allows for that. As you know, like the entertainment industry was notoriously bad about how it treated women in particular. So I would say it may not be this person so much as what sort of people are drawn into that. But some things I have done is, again, going back to this idea of saving face, if you're in a position where you can get alone with that individual, just say, hey, I just wanted to understand, yesterday or when such and such happened, X, you did X. I'd like to understand how we can avoid that in the future because it was demoralizing for me. And, I suspect, you would want me to treat you with the same level of respect. And so just, I'd like to learn from this. Is there anything that, you expect differently? And if based on whatever they say, and at the end, just say, look, I just would appreciate if you didn't do, and then just whatever the action is. If they continue to do it, then you already know your answer, which is walk away from it because you're not going to change that person. But you've met them with a level of empathy. You're being confident in communicating to them and telling them what you expect in terms of how they should treat you. And if they can't agree to that sort of contract, then you can leave. I know that sounds awful, but that's my recommendation. I don't know what Lex or others think.
Oh, yeah, I'll jump in, definitely. I have two stories to share. So my first job out of, doing computer aided design drafting, I was going to school in parallel paths. It actually didn't bother me, but when someone brought it to my attention, then it bothered me. So for some reason, my boss was Chinese descent, but for whatever reason, his boss, when he was around, he was American, would call me sweetie or honey. Hi, sweetie, how are you doing? Hey, honey, can you get me those vellums? I need these drawings and da-da-da. And a male counterpart said, doesn't that bother you? And I said, no, I didn't think, it was my first job. I was just trying to be not ruffling feathers, just trying to keep the waves. And then, but when they brought it to my attention, I thought, well, yeah, I guess it's kind of condescending. I think, yeah, they think like I'm like maybe like a waitress, like I'm going to bring them coffee or something, but it's not. And so the next interaction I had with that person, I called them sweetie and honey back, and they looked at me and they were like, because the man was much older. I was probably like 19, and he was like probably in his late 60s or mid 60s, and he was like, oh no, don't call me honey. I said, oh, okay, good, then I don't like it either, so we can just move forward, not calling each other honey or sweetie. That's great. But I was scared because he was my boss's boss, and I thought, what if he like gets mad and gets me fired or something like that? Another quick example of another time, there was an engineer I worked with, and he would get so mad when I would do drawings for him. And I just felt like he didn't like me. And I said, can we have lunch? Can we just have lunch? Because there was clearly animosity between him for no reason. And he shared that because I went to like a trade school at the time, ITT, they don't even exist anymore. He felt like I took a shortcut in getting into engineering. And I said, well, I'm doing this because my major at Cal Poly Pomona is mechanical engineering, but I don't know if I really want to do this and stick it out. So as I'm going to school, I thought, let me just start doing the work and see how it goes. So he appreciated that. And in the end, I said, it doesn't matter if I draw the line left to right and you draw it right to left. What matters is that the pipe is 15 feet long and there's going to be an elbow and then another pipe. So why does it matter? And I don't know, like a light went off in his head and he was like, yeah, I guess it doesn't matter that how you do that. The end product is the same. It doesn't matter your style, my style, as long as the work is accurate. So I feel like sometimes when you get into those, just asking them like, what am I doing that's bothering you? Because I don't know. And I don't want to keep feeling this tension. Those are just like two examples that I feel like were helpful to share with you guys.
No, those are great. I have had similar challenges, and I think my sister's gonna love this. I don't like being called Kimmy in the workplace, or just period at all. And when I was in some of my first leadership positions and someone was like, oh, Kimmy, shh, just be quiet. Having to have that conversation with that person privately, like saying, hey, I'd appreciate if you would call me either Kim or Kimberly. Either one is fine, but just not Kimmy. And just setting boundaries for yourself and being comfortable setting boundaries. And then just reminding people, hey, remember we talked about that, you not calling me Kimmy, I'd appreciate you doing that. It's perfectly acceptable to do that. And you should be okay and confident enough to say, I don't have to be treated the way that you feel I should. I have my own standards. And if it's below my standards, I'm going to let you know and I'm going to give you an opportunity to change. But the line is in the sand. Did that answer your question, hopefully, Bella?
Yes, thank you so much, guys. That was very inspirational and gave a lot of insight.
Wonderful, wonderful. Does anyone else have any other questions or topics or things that they want to discuss with this group? All right, well, thank you so much. Really appreciate your participation in this. I hope this is beneficial to you. I'll be sending out a survey as well as a recording to everyone just to get your feedback so we can continue to make this a productive workshop for everyone. So thank you all for all of your help and your participation. I think this has been great. And I look forward to talking to you next about how women can support women.
Can I ask the panelists to stay on for a second? Oh, we lost.
Yeah. Oh, I was just gonna say the same thing, Sonia.
I think we lost Kirsten already.
Kirsten.
I guess that's okay. She has things to take care of.